Hi there, everybody, and welcome to the Growth Execution Podcast. I'm your host, Mal McCallion. I'm here this week with Shawn Channell of Just Launch. Shawn, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Excited to be on.
Excellent. We're super excited to have you on here too, and thanks so much for coming. Now, as you know, we are absolutely obsessed here with basically launching. Right, so launching businesses. The audience is here to understand a little bit more about how that process works. So I wondered if you'd take me back to the time when Just Launch launched. When you did just launch your launch, Just Launch, what happened? What brought that together? How was that? How did that become a thing?
It's weird. It was really kind of a journey that wasn't necessarily defined. So I started with my own podcast called Just Launch, and it was really around helping people launch themselves towards their goals and their dreams and their ambitions. And that was its own kind of piece. I was still working in the corporate world at that time, training business leaders and training salespeople. And really the step, I started working with I just do some networking. There was a organization that asked me to come in and provide sales training to their business owners, their collection of small business owners who they really felt that they needed to have a better sense of how to sell themselves and their business. One of the things we don't think about a lot as getting into business for ourselves is how much selling's involved. We typically get really good at some aspect of business that we're like, hey, we'll go start our own business doing this. Well, without realizing the amount of selling involved, especially initially. So I was asked to do that, and then that evolved to this, idea of, hey, there's a need. There's this market out there of small business owners that aren't really adept, that don't necessarily come from a sales background, and could really use some assistance in not only their own sales skills, but really launching their sales organizations. Mm-hmm. And so around first part of last year, I decided to just launch my own, adventure into the entrepreneur space for the third time at this point in life. And that's really how Just Launch came to fruition.
Fantastic, listeners. It's a great story. And I couldn't agree more about the idea of this kind of sales requirement. It is, but we're Grocery, we spend a long time on product marketing and sales kind of individually. And I always find that there's the product guys, right? The guys who are so obsessed with like building something visionary and amazing. And I love those guys. I that's not me, but I love them. And then there's the marketing guys who are so creative about making everything look pretty. And then sales is kind of like this afterthought, right? It's kind of the thing. They hope that either product's going to do it or marketing's going to do it, and they don't have to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
I imagine, and I've listened to your podcast as well. I imagine that's kind of where you sit, right? You are there to kind of help those guys to really understand a bit more about that process and how that needs to work.
Yeah, that's really where I help a lot of the small businesses I work with. It's really kind of a 1-2 punch. In some aspects, they're not ready to hire their own sales teams, so I just work with them to coach typically it's the owners. And refine their sales approaches. Because you're right, lots of them rely heavily on the product. Some of them have great funnels from a marketing perspective, but then when they get in front of that client and they go to, make the sale, they struggle and their close ratios are really low. And so it's giving them a sales methodology that's not traditional in its approach, which works really well for people who aren't from a sales background. And then in some cases, I partner with them to help them launch their sales teams. And I think a lot of people, especially in the small business space, think that they'll just hire a salesperson or two and that will make their business grow. And
make the rain. Yeah.
What they find is that they're constantly having to, those people, the turnover is extremely high. They're not seeing the growth. There's a lot of investment without a lot of return. And because there's a formula to that whole process. And so we help them build out that first sales team, give them the foundation so that they have the resources and the tools and the knowledge so that as they grow, that sales team grows with them. But it allows them to step out of the sales role as an owner and really focus on being a business owner versus a salesperson.
Fantastic. And what do you think is the biggest mistake that kind of, particularly perhaps startup entrepreneurs make when they're looking at their sales side?
Well, I think you mentioned it, right? There's the product people who just think their product's going to sell themselves. And in some cases it does. And then there's the marketing people who are really good at building a funnel. But at the end of the day, especially when we're selling to, in a business to business model, especially when you're working with other companies, the people connection is really what's going to make the difference. Your prices can be higher if you build that connection, right? Your product may not be as good if you build that connection. Your marketing really gets you the conversation potentially, but even in some cases, we often underestimate the amount of selling that's going to require. I mean, that means, cold emails, cold calls, first client conversations, product demonstrations, but really understanding where your potential client's trying to go and what their goals and their challenges are, and how to identify them, and then how to match up your value. There's a reason that a lot of salespeople, one, aren't very successful, but also have a bad reputation, is they just go out and they pitch their product or service. And you can do that if you do it enough times. If you pitch enough people, you're going to find somebody who needs your product or service. But that takes a lot of churn. That takes a lot of people to do that too. Whereas if you're focused really on the client's goals and objectives and seeing if there is a need that you can help them with, that's a much different conversation, much different approach that a lot of people aren't necessarily trained on.
Yeah, I think that's so right and so well articulated. It's, for me, it's almost like this trust thing, right? So everything, sales is trust. You wouldn't buy anything if you thought it was not going to do what you wanted it to do and fix something that you wanted to fix. So actually knitting together those kind of strands of trust along the way, there's different entry points, right? You can't just go straight in the front door and go, right, here it is. You've got to kind of try and make sure that they're comfortable before you walk through the door.
Yeah, and there's sometimes one of the training examples I use is, I tell this story about my wife going down to business trip, and she's taking the car, and I'm helping her load the boxes of materials into the car. And in doing so, one of the books falls to the ground, and I bend down and I see it, and I notice that the tread on her tire is pretty much gone, right? So she's gonna, if she drives 3 hours, likely she's gonna end on the side of the road. And so we need to get her a new tire.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of those types of scenarios where she had a need, right? But if someone had sent her, called her or sent her an email and said, hey, we're having a sale on tires, if she doesn't know she has that challenge, that problem,
yes,
she's going to ignore and dismiss that.
Yes.
Where once she identifies that, or how someone help her identify that, now there's a certain need. And one of the pieces that we miss with sales lots of times is our potential clients don't always know the root cause of their challenges. In some cases, don't even know they have a challenge, right? So we can help them identify those challenges and what those causes of those challenges are. And then that might bring us an opportunity to help them solve them. Yeah. But again, if you're just going out there and pitching tires, then if they're like, I don't need tires, my tires are good, right? Because they haven't checked tires, they're going to immediately dismiss you, even if they really could use your product or service. And so that's one of those nuances that a lot of salespeople just don't adjust for, that causes them to miss out on a lot of opportunity.
I couldn't agree more. I think that there is that kind of temptation when you've got something and you think it's great, particularly again, early stage entrepreneurs who love their stuff, right? They've nurtured it from a baby all the way through, and it's like, this is so special to them, and they're just going, here is your solution, and the customer's just going, I don't need it, or I don't even want. I don't know what. Yeah, he's just like, no. You've absolutely just used this. It's amazing, and it is much more of that kind of consultative sale, isn't it? It's that kind of like, how are you feeling? Is your car running okay? Have you noticed anything wrong? And just bringing them along rather than kind of smashing them in the face with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's again, that's one of the reasons salespeople have such a bad rap, is that they're very aggressive. And you also mentioned one of the challenges a lot of entrepreneurs face when hiring their salespeople is, we're so excited about our product or service, we expect our salespeople to have that same level of passion around it.
Really good point.
And even if we're good at selling because of that passion, because passion is a great sales tool.
Absolutely
engaging.
If
they don't have that same level of passion, then their level of success isn't as high as ours. And then we start to get frustrated with them because they're not performing at the level that we think they should or they could. And, then the relationship starts to deteriorate. And then next thing you know, they're out the door and we're hiring the next guy who, again, isn't as passionate as we are. So you get into this cycle as an entrepreneur of churn and burn just because the salespeople that you're bringing on don't know your product as well as you do or don't have the same level of passion that you do.
Yeah, and it's almost kind of emotional thing, isn't it? It's like, actually, I want believers. It's kind of like, I want a religion here. I want a cult. I want everybody to believe what I believe. Otherwise, you're out. And we'll get somebody else in. And that is a real failing. And I mean, when you think about how entrepreneurs do employ salespeople, is there a particular type or a particular thing that they should be looking for?
Well, it's hard because, this is one of those intangibles that, I've spent the last 15 years hiring and training and developing salespeople and sales leaders.
Yeah.
And, I've, in a lot of the conversations I've had with sales leaders, one of my, I think my biggest challenges is how do you hire a salesperson? And, I can give you a level of questions to ask, and I provide that with all my clients. But teaching them how to interpret the answers is really the secret. It's, you have to find people who are hungry. You have to find people who are, I prefer people who are loyal, although I'm not opposed to hiring a salesperson who I think can bring me, some short-term impacts. If
Ruthless mercenary.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, people who are, they don't have to be experienced salespeople, my viewpoint, to be successful salespeople. If they're driven and they have the ability to learn, those are really the two biggest attributes that I'm looking for. And again, one of the mistakes that a lot of people make is they start looking for experienced salespeople to bring on because they don't necessarily have the skill sets to train or develop salespeople on their own. But if we think about it logically, how often are really good salespeople looking for new sales jobs? Right?
So true, yeah.
Your really good salespeople don't want to start over. They don't want to leave the company they're with.
They're being hunted all the time by people on LinkedIn and are being, they're ready.
They want to stay where they're at because they have the clientele, they have the business. There's not a lot of incentive for a really good salesperson to leave. Now, sometimes life happens, and so they have to start over, relocate, or company goes out of business or whatever. But there's a very small percentage of good salespeople out on the market at any time, which means what happens if you're hiring an experienced salesperson, you're typically hiring a B-level salesperson at best.
Yeah.
And it's not that those people can't become A-level salespeople, but they still need the coaching, the training, the development that you're trying to avoid.
Yeah. And they may have some bad habits actually that need to be trained out at them. That's going to kind of set you back a bit as well. The two things that you identified there, I couldn't agree more on. In good salespeople, for me, it's that kind of determination, as you say, and that willingness to be trained and be coached. And I always kind of think of it as curiosity and resilience. Yeah. I think if you've got that kind of level of interest in other people, then you're going to have that interest in their problems and how you can solve them. And the resilience thing is almost self-explanatory. I know there's a lot of no's. There is a lot of picking up that phone, hitting that send button that goes to nowhere, but you just got to keep believing.
Yeah, it is. It's, one of the things that allows me, I think, to be effective in my approach as a trainer is I spent my first 8 years as a salesperson just getting rejected. I failed. My first business failed, mostly because I couldn't sell the concept to other people. I tried my hand at real estate for a couple of years and barely scraped enough to get by. I did 2 different stints as a car salesman and I couldn't cut it. And then I did about 2.5 years as a door-to-door salesperson. And that's really kind of where I got past the biggest thing for me was the fear of rejection.
Yeah.
which is, that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because you're fearful of getting rejected, so you don't do the right
Yeah.
things, and then you get rejected anyway. But door to door, I mean, I was talking to 100 people a day with the expectation that 90 were going to tell me no.
Yeah.
And when you're knocking on people's doors, it's various levels of aggression. Uh,
That is nails. That is hardcore. Well done.
So you get over the fear of rejection real quick. But I think that level of failure gave me a unique perspective on, what it takes to be good at sales, especially if that's not what you're born to do per se, right? Like it certainly was not what I was born to do. I was introverted and shy and awkward and all the things. And I just kept that resilience, right?
Yeah,
I just kept
there it
pushing
is.
and pushing and
Right
pushing.
there. Yeah. Curiosity, resilience. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and brilliant. And what I love as well is, and having again listened to your podcast and read up on you, it's this idea that you don't have to be born to do it, right? You can actually learn these skills. As long as you've got that innate kind of desire and passion for what you do, then you can get out there. You can find the right people to help you out as well. When you think about the kind of times that you did kind of struggle, you did have that challenge, and there'll be people listening right now, perhaps you've got it. Is there another way of doing it without going door to door to try and get that level of confidence, do you think, that kind of turnaround?
I mean, yes, absolutely. I think, I think finding the right mentor and coach for you is a big part of it. I mean, again, at the end of the day, it's learning. But it's also mindset, right? And I think that you can change your mindset in lots of different ways. For me, I just had to go through and face the fear head on, right? I just had to go through, the door slams and the, chasing me down the street and calling the cops on me and all those things.
Wow.
But for a lot of people, it's as simple as maybe listening to a podcast and switching the mindset a little bit. What I came to understand is that my perception of sales and what that meant was based off of a negative perception. It was that salespeople are pushy, and I didn't want to be pushy. I didn't feel comfortable with pushy. It's that salespeople are, aggressive and slimy and all these things. And to me, it was always kind of weird that I was even interested in sales, given that my negative perception of most salespeople.
Yeah.
But what I came to understand is sales is really about being an effective communicator. It's really about being able to listen and understand, acknowledge, digest what you heard, and then expressing your own value or your product or service in a way that allows the other person to understand and acknowledge and accept that there's some benefit to them.
Yeah, love it.
And if you can look at sales as really just a conversation between two people that's looking to kind of have some mutual understanding and mutual agreement that, you have a need that I can help solve, or even in some cases, I can't help solve, right?
Yeah.
Like I've gotten much more comfortable with coming to terms that, we're not a good fit. Like what I do isn't what you need, right? And maybe not even ever, just not right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But sorry, go ahead.
That shift is a big piece for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, again, it's about trust, right? So it's about, if you're building this relationship with somebody, and it may not be today, it may not be this week, this month, this year, but actually somehow, somewhere, that guy's going to have a conversation with somebody who does need it and say, Shawn's just so good for this. You've really got to get in touch, So none of this sales to me is wasted either. Either it's honing your skills and getting you better at what you do, or it is, going through the numbers, and for every 10th call, that's going to be the win. So you've got to get through those 9 first. But certainly, I think that the kind of on sale where actually the influence and the effectiveness of your communication is being spread wider. I think it's so important. And again, going back to your point about the sort of that sales has got such a bad reputation, as it has been one of the, I always think that they kind of shove them out in the corner or out in the corridor almost if they could, because it's so noisy and shouty and all that. But actually, it's a profession, right? And I think it needs to be taken that seriously, because without a sales team, your growth of your business is going to be slower and going to be stymied.
Yeah, I mean, as entrepreneurs, we can only sell so much, right? There's only so much time in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And, and realistically, we're typically good at one aspect, right? Like we're good at the product side, or we're good at the marketing side, and maybe we're good at the sales side, but you need to have, for real growth, for real scale, you need to have other people who are really good at those things that you're not. And typically for most of us in the entrepreneur space, it's not the sales side that we're good at. So hiring those salespeople is really the only way that you're going to, double, triple, quadruple your business, because you need those other people out there doing that sales aspects that you just don't have the bandwidth for.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks so much for that. That's really great stuff about the sales. What I'm going to do now is just kind of flip through a few quick fire questions, right, about your growth, your business, now you got together, so the audience can hear about building business and so on. So obviously you started the business, as you say, kind of back last year. What do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Oh, geez. The amount of marketing, the difference between sales and marketing has really been an educational experience for me. Background in sales, lots of sales training, which is my product and service, right? So the product side I'm good at, the sales side I'm good at. It was building my funnel has really been the most learning that's taken me. And I don't think I really had an appreciation for the marketing side of business until I had to do it myself. So that.
Have you got anybody to apologize to from businesses in the past?
Completely. Yeah, very much so.
I know. And who or what would you say is your inspiration, if you have one?
Well, my wife's a big inspiration for me. I mean, she's in the same line of work as me. But she was definitely the one who said to me, in fact, it's where the name comes from. She said to me when I was pondering doing a podcast, and I spent 6 months thinking about it, researching it, wondering whether it was, something I wanted to dive into. She's like, you just need to launch this thing. Like, you have something that resonates with people. And, she's, in the training world as well. So she knows the challenges and how difficult it can be to sometimes connect with an audience. She's like, watching you train, watching you inspire people is something that is, not everyone has. So you really need to do that. And so, that just launched, she's like, you just launch this thing, just go with it. And I was like, well, I guess that's the name of the podcast. So that's really was the person that pushed me to take that leap.
Fantastic. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I mean, it's there's been a ton, but it's really don't give up. And I think the door-to-door piece was really a game changer for me in a lot of ways, but the mindset shifted for me was their message was much of it. When I did real estate and car sales and all the other types of sales jobs I had before, you almost made it when you got a no. And especially in the car business, if you let someone walk off the lot, you were a failure. And you got, in some cases you got yelled at from the sales manager, which certainly doesn't help you with your confidence.
No.
But in door-to-door, it was, play the law of averages, right? The biggest thing is to not give up. It's if you play the numbers, the sales will come, right? Expect that when you talk to 9 people, those first 9 will say no, right? That's okay. That's what's supposed to happen, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're so hard on ourselves when it comes to failure. And what we don't recognize is that failure is built into everything. Right? I mean, the best athletes, the best entrepreneurs, the best business people fail. They fail all the time. What they come to realize is that those failures, they can learn from something each time.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it's just, I mean, you look at some of the, you look at little LeBron or Michael Jordan, right? They know that they're not going to make 100% of the shots, right? It's not even, realistic, right? Yeah. If they shoot 40, 50%, right, they're ecstatic, right? they have a night where they're on fire and they shoot 60%. That's incredible. But they still miss 4 out of 10 times. But that doesn't even, those misses don't even bother them, right?
Yeah,
That's just statistically reality. And so to me, that was a big piece of, don't give up, because the losses, the failures, the setbacks, the challenges, the rejections, those are all part of the process. If you keep going, you'll find the yeses, you'll find the success, you'll find the wins, you'll find the growth.
Brilliant. Listen, that's such a great moment to end on, and thank you so much for your time. Shawn Channell of Just Launched. So where can people listening find out more about you?
Yeah, of course, the podcast, Just Launch. It's on all the podcast platforms out there. They can visit our website, just-launch.com. And connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn. They can also check out Just Launch videos for our digital courses.
Fantastic. Listen, you've been such a great guest, and thank you so much for your time and for all of your wisdom, putting it out there for our listeners here. That's Shawn Channell, as I say, of justlaunch.com. Do go check out all of his stuff. It's really, really good, particularly on the kind of sales side, and particularly if you're not a natural salesperson, as you say. So that's it for this week from the Growth Execution Podcast. Thanks so much for listening in. If you need anything else from us here, do go check out growtion.co, growtion.co. Loads and loads of growth tips, everything you need there as well. So thanks again for listening in, and have a great growth week. If you're ready, let's get growing.